Okay, so welcome. My name's Jacob Robertson, and this is my EUB343 Assessment 2. I'm a member of the Tuesday morning 9 till 12 tutorial, and the school that I attended for my prac was a 7 to 12 metropolitan co-educational state high school with one main campus with a bit over 1,000 students. The classroom context that I used for my assessment and feedback taking was a Year 10 history class. It was a mixed ability class of 28 students, and the students had access to either classroom laptops or a personal device during my lessons. The key learning intention, so the content descriptor that I used in my Year 10 history class was Australia's contribution to international popular culture, music, film, television and sport. This was due to the fact that their assessment was circled around this, and it was a major part, and that was the content descriptor that I used in conference with my prac teacher at the time. The learning intention was to learn about popular culture and formulate the information into a research assessment, which was the main assessment task that we were focusing on getting the students through while I was teaching them. The diagnostic assessment that I used was diagnostic questioning. And that was to start conducting my lessons, and the use of this was to gather what the students knew about the topic and to get them started focusing on a topic for their research so that they could start with their assessment. By doing this assessment, students who understood the content were able to progress, and they weren't halted by any lazy teaching by me. They were able to continue on, and I was able to focus my attention to students who needed my help, and by doing this I was able to gather this information through this activity. Students who were asked to answer these questions in order to determine prior knowledge and what to research for their assessment. So this kind of gave them a bit of a prompt. They were able to think during this activity and prompted them into what they would most like to focus on for their assessment. Because it is a research assessment, what they would like to research and things that they felt confident enough to write their assignment on. My analysis of this activity and the information that I gathered was that 40% of the students had a topic chosen and were ready to start their research. So these students didn't need a lot of conferencing. They were ready to start, and they were ready to continue with their research and start formulating focus questions and a hypothesis, and they were pretty right amongst it. So that was really good. 30% of the students in the class had an idea in their minds, but still needed a bit more help and information on that topic. So I was able to go and see those that 30% of the students and kind of have a 1 to 2 minute conference with them and start giving them an idea of what they would like to research and certain pros and cons between focusing on that topic. And then the last 30% of the class, they were stuck and they needed quite a considerable amount of help, which is perfectly fine. I was able to give them a lot more one-on-one help during that lesson and give them a bit more of a hand to determine what content and what topic they would focus on in popular culture. So this meant that my time was spent throughout that lesson helping the 60% of combined students who needed help determining their topic to get their leg up into focusing on their assessment. So my learning experience one was due to the fact that this was an individual assessment task, I was able to formulate individual workshop groups. So before the students started to work on independent learning, I created individual workshop groups for each of the students. So this was determined by splitting the kids up into groups that shared the similar topic to what they were, or the same topic, because there was about 4 or 5 topics that the students could choose from, and they were also put in with like-minded students. So the reason for this was to teach different levels of student skills that are needed in order to better their assessment. So I was able to go around, they were split into about 4 or 5 groups throughout the class, and I was able to go up to the students and analyse how far in their assessment they were. They were all on similar levels, and then I was able to give them geared feedback and geared teaching towards what they needed help with. So some groups were stuck on the hypothesis and focus questions. Others were past the focus questions, so I was able to go, okay, these students here need a bit more help on this part, but these kids need a bit more help on the referencing. So through all this, I was able to take down this information to create a bit more of an idea of where the students were at and which students needed a bit more help. And this was done just by conversational, and I knew which students were going through this assessment with flying colours and which were struggling and needed a bit more help. But by using this group conferencing technique mentioned by Killeen, I was able to cater my teaching for appropriate student learning. My formative assessment strategy post-conferencing with the workshops was done in an Excel spreadsheet. So as you can see to the right here, highlighted in yellow, is what I observed as to how they were progressing with their learning and with their assignments. This would allow me to be more proactive in terms of getting the assessment completed by the final date. So my reasoning behind this was to make sure that all the students were of a capable ability to hand me their best possible draft when the due date came. I didn't want any students not submitting me anything or submitting me something of a subpar standard. So by doing this, I was being a lot more proactive rather than reactive post-draft time, because I knew that the turnaround window from the draft to the final assessment was quite small. So I needed all students to be on task and completing this. So I had this Excel spreadsheet up to monitor student progress. So this allowed me to formulate feedback prior to the drafting process, as well as refining the feedback post-draft. So I was able to be onto the kids who needed a bit more help prior to submitting me their draft, and I was able to give other students lots and lots of feedback, because in Hattie 2007, it is made clear that giving students a lot of feedback around their topic and around what they're focusing on is extremely important to getting the best results. So I decided to give my students a lot more feedback prior to them submitting it in order to get the best possible marks for them. So if we could, as we see here, this is Delta. Delta submitted me a draft, and I knew that Delta was going to give me a finished product, or what I thought that she was up to at that stage. So she had most of her focus questions completed, although it was a bit rushed, and she was still a bit lost, and she needed a bit more help with refining her format of her assignments. So I included the appropriate feedback on this sheet. So she needed a lot more quotes and references along the side, which would help boost her evidence and thus her formatting in her assignment. And she needed to eliminate the titles to have it a bit more free-flowing. And this continues on her second page. A few spelling mistakes, a few easy spelling mistakes, which shows to me that she hasn't reread her work. So I was able to formulate feedback for her prior to her draft submitted. I gave her feedback based on the work that she'd done then, and then I gave her feedback post-draft. So I was able to monitor her research, and I knew what she was going to submit to me. Due to this, I was able to give her adequate feedback that would result in her working to submitting a quality assessment. So this is Mars's work, a student in my class called Mars, and I knew by monitoring his work that he wasn't going to submit me a draft. At this current stage, he was failing, and he was one of the students who were in my crosshairs for submitting me good work. So his research book was of a good quality. However, he wasn't able to turn that into a good draft. So I needed to gear my feedback to him in a certain way that would get him to produce the best possible work. So due to the fact that he was in danger of failing the class, if this was something he would submit for his final assessment, I had plenty of time to formulate feedback and assistance to allow him to make changes for his final assessment. So to get the students to nip it in the bud, the fact that he needed to work harder on his assessment to give me a completed copy in the week after for when his final assessment was due. At the end of the drafting process, I was able to do another formative assessment piece. So that was to create a full lesson based on the draft feedback that I'd given to a lot of students. So the feedback that was given was present on most of the drafts. So just silly mistakes, referencing, lack of format, just different things like that. And this saved me time saying that to each individual student as I went in conference with them individually about their drafts. By doing this, I was able to only spend about 30 to 40 seconds with some students who needed a bit of a hand with just a title, but they were relatively on task, and I knew that they were going to submit me a quality assessment, and that allowed me to spend more time with students like Mars, who were struggling and who were at risk of failing. So after my conferencing at the end of that lesson, I was able to record their information using the red, which was post-draft, so yellow pre-draft, red post-draft, so that I was able to kind of go, well, these students now, Amelia and Brennan, who were not submitting anything and not doing anything pre-draft, had really picked their act up, and that showed on the table there. So by including this information and by keeping a good quality reference to it, I was able to see by a few days out of the final assessment, I was able to see which students were in doubt of submitting me a good quality assessment, so that they needed a lot more help, rather than the students like Tegan or like Delta, who had done quite a considerable amount post-draft, that they were going to submit me something of a good quality content, to make sure that all students were submitting me something of a passable content. So this can be referenced by a few of the sources down here that I referenced throughout. So picking up good quality content from these scholars, was able to have a good quality part of my class that were passing and that were achieving higher grades, which was what I want, and what was a really, really good thing for me to see from my students. Thank you so much for watching.